I never thought a single moment could rewrite everything I thought I knew about myself. But there I was, standing frozen in the doorway of our shared apartment at 2 in the morning, watching my best friend and roommate, Ethan, do something I absolutely wasn't supposed to see. My heart hammered against my ribcage as our eyes met across the dimly lit living room. And in that suspended second, the entire foundation of our friendship shifted beneath my feet. What started as a harmless midnight prank turned into something far more complicated, far more real, and far more terrifying than I ever could have imagined. Let me back up 6 months. To the beginning of this story, when Ethan Monroe was just my college buddy who needed a roommate, and I needed an escape from my suffocating dorm situation. We'd met in freshman orientation 3 years ago, bonding over our shared love of terrible horror movies and our mutual inability to cook anything more complex than instant ramen. Ethan was the kind of guy everyone gravitated toward, tall and lean with messy dark hair that always looked like he'd just rolled out of bed, warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and an easy confidence that made him magnetic without trying. I was more reserved, quieter, the kind of person who observed rather than commanded attention. With sandy blonde hair, I kept short and practical, and blue eyes that my sister once said revealed too much of what I was thinking. Moving in together seemed like the perfect solution for both of us. The apartment was small but cozy, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely large enough for 2 people to stand in simultaneously, and a living room that we'd furnish with mismatched thrift store finds and posters from our favorite bands. Within weeks, we'd fallen into an easy rhythm. Ethan worked the morning shift at a local coffee shop while taking evening classes, and I had a regular 9-to-5 internship at a marketing firm, which meant our schedules complemented each other perfectly. We'd cross paths in the mornings when he was leaving and I was getting ready, and then spend our evenings together, sprawled on our worn couch, controllers in hand, or arguing about which movie to watch next. What I didn't anticipate was how comfortable it would all become, how natural it would feel to have him in my space, in my life, in ways that went beyond simple friendship. I didn't notice it at first, the way my pulse would quicken when he'd brush past me in our narrow hallway, the way I'd find excuses to stay up later just to talk to him after his shift, the way I'd catch myself watching him when he wasn't looking, memorizing the way he'd push his hair back from his forehead or the sound of his laugh when something genuinely amused him. These were things I told myself were normal, just the result of spending so much time together, of building a genuine friendship with someone who actually understood me. But then came the small moments that were harder to explain away. Like the Tuesday evening when we'd both reached for the last beer in the fridge at the same time, our hands colliding. And instead of just laughing it off, we'd both frozen, staring at where our fingers touched for what felt like an eternity before Ethan cleared his throat and pulled away, insisting I take it. Or the Saturday morning when I'd walked into the bathroom without knocking, thinking Ethan was still asleep, only to find him fresh from the shower with a towel wrapped around his waist, water droplets trailing down his chest. And the way we'd both stood there, neither of us moving, the air thick with something I couldn't name, before I'd stammered an apology and practically fled. I started noticing other things too the way. Ethan's gaze would linger on me sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way he'd find reasons to touch my shoulder or my arm when he was making a point. The way he'd lean in closer than necessary when we were watching movies on the couch. Our thighs pressed together, the warmth of him seeping through the fabric of our jeans. I told myself I was imagining it, projecting something that wasn't there because of my own confusion about what I was feeling. I'd never questioned my sexuality before, had dated girls in high school and early college without much thought, but something about Ethan made me reconsider everything I thought I knew about myself. The prank war started innocently enough. About 3 months into our living arrangement, Ethan had replaced the sugar in my coffee with salt one morning, and I'd retaliated by setting all his phone alarms to go off at random intervals throughout the day. It escalated from their plastic wrap over the toilet seat, fake spider in the shower, short-sheeting beds, hiding important items in increasingly ridiculous places. It became our thing, a game we played that added an element of playful chaos to our daily routine. We'd laugh about it, try to outdo each other, spend hours plotting our next moves like we were strategizing for battle. But that night, the night everything changed, I'd planned what I thought would be the ultimate prank. Ethan had been stressed about his upcoming finals, pulling late nights at the coffee shop, followed by marathon study sessions that left him exhausted and irritable. I'd decided to lighten the mood by setting up an elaborate fake crime scene in our living room while he was at work, complete with chalk outlines, fake blood, corn syrup, and food coloring, and evidence markers made from folded paper. My plan was to be asleep in my room when he got home, let him freak out for a minute, then jump out and laugh at his reaction. I'd spent hours setting everything up perfectly, getting every detail right, even recording the whole thing with my phone hidden on the bookshelf so we could watch his reaction later. Then I'd retreated to my bedroom, leaving the door slightly ajar so I could hear when he came home, my heart racing with anticipation and suppressed laughter. But Ethan's shift ran later than expected, and somewhere around midnight, despite my best intentions, I dozed off on top of my covers, still fully dressed, waiting for the sound of his key in the lock. What woke me wasn't the sound of the door opening, but rather something quieter, more intimate, the sound of Ethan's voice, low and intense, coming from the living room. At first, still foggy with sleep, I thought maybe he'd brought someone home. He was talking to a friend, or maybe even a girl he'd been seeing. The thought sent an unexpected spike of something, sharp and uncomfortable through my chest, something that felt uncomfortably like jealousy, though I refused to label it as such. I sat up slowly, quietly, my curiosity overriding my original plan, and crept toward my bedroom door. Through the crack, I could see into the living room, illuminated only by the soft glow of the lamp we kept on in the corner. Ethan was there, standing in the middle of my fake crime scene, but he wasn't reacting the way I'd expected. He wasn't confused or alarmed by the elaborate setup. Instead, he was on his phone, and as I listened more carefully, I realized he was talking to someone, his voice tight with emotion I'd rarely heard from him. My chest tightened as I strained to hear what he was saying. "I can't keep doing this," Ethan said, running his hand through his hair in a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of his distress. "I can't keep pretending everything's normal when I feel like I'm losing my mind." There was a pause as whoever was on the other end responded, and then Ethan continued, his voice dropping lower, more vulnerable. "You don't understand. I see him every day. We live together. Do you know what it's like to be this close to someone and know you can never, that they could never?" My heart stopped. The pronoun hung in the air between us, even though Ethan didn't know I was listening. He was talking about a guy. Ethan, my best friend, my roommate, the person I'd been having these confusing, intense feelings about for months, was apparently going through something similar. But about who? The thought that he might be interested in someone else, some other guy, sent another wave of that uncomfortable jealousy through me, stronger this time. Impossible to ignore. "It's different with him," Ethan continued, and I found myself holding my breath, pressing closer to the door. I've never felt this way about anyone before. It's not just physical, though God knows that's been complicated enough to deal with. It's everything. The way he laughs at my terrible jokes, the way he leaves little notes on the fridge reminding me about things I need to do, the way he exists in the same space as me and makes it feel like home in a way nowhere else ever has. I should have announced myself then. Should have made some noise to let him know I was awake and listening. But I was paralyzed, frozen in place by the raw honesty in his voice, by the words that seemed to be describing us, describing the way we lived together, the small intimacies of our shared life. Could he possibly be talking about me? The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, sending my pulse racing so fast I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. "The worst part is," Ethan said, his voice cracking slightly, "I think I'm in love with him. Actually in love, not just interested or attracted or curious. And I have no idea if he could ever feel the same way, if he even sees me that way. Or if I'm just his straight roommate who he tolerates because the rent is cheap."
Aft.
But it was a bitter sound, nothing like his usual warm laughter that made my chest feel light. "I'm terrified that if I say something, I'll ruin everything." We'll lose the friendship. I'll lose my living situation. I'll have to watch him be uncomfortable around me for however long it takes to move out. That's when I made my mistake. In my shock, in my desperate need to process what I was hearing, I shifted my weight, and the floorboard beneath my feet creaked a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet apartment. Ethan's head snapped toward my door, his eyes widening as he saw me standing there in the gap, clearly awake, clearly listening. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the distance between us suddenly feeling vast, despite being only a few feet of physical space. "I have to go," Ethan said abruptly into his phone, not breaking eye contact with me. He ended the call without waiting for a response, his hand dropping to his side as the phone clattered onto the coffee table, narrowly missing one of my fake evidence markers. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of our breathing and the distant hum of traffic from the street below. Neither of us moved, neither of us spoke. And I watched as 1,000 emotions flickered across Ethan's face: shock, fear, resignation, and something that looked heartbreakingly like hope. "How much did you hear?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper, and I could see his hands trembling slightly at his sides. He looked vulnerable in a way I'd never seen him before. All his usual confidence stripped away, leaving only the raw, honest person underneath. Something in my chest twisted painfully at the sight of him like this, at knowing I'd inadvertently caused him this distress by eavesdropping on what was clearly meant to be a private conversation. "Enough," I managed to say, my own voice sounding strange to my ears, too high and too tight. I stepped fully into the doorway, then into the living room, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me as I navigated around my forgotten prank setup. The fake crime scene suddenly seemed absurd, childish, completely out of place in this moment that felt far too real and far too important. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to listen. I was waiting for you to come home because of the prank, and I fell asleep. And then I heard your voice." "It doesn't matter," Ethan interrupted, shaking his head as he took a step back, putting more distance between us. His eyes were bright with unshed tears, and seeing him on the verge of crying made my own throat tighten with emotion. "You heard what you heard. Now you know, and we'll figure out the apartment situation. I can start looking for a new place tomorrow. I don't want to make you uncomfortable in your own home." "Wait, what?" The words burst out of me before I could think them through, before I could consider what I was revealing with my reaction. "You're leaving? Because of what you said on the phone?" My heart was hammering so hard now I was certain he could hear it. My hands had started shaking, adrenaline and fear and something else flooding through my system. "Ethan, you can't just leave. This is your home too. And I don't want you to go." He looked at me then, really looked at me, his brown eyes searching my face for something I wasn't sure how to show him. "Logan," he said, my name sounding different in his mouth than it ever had before, weighted with meaning and emotion. "You don't understand what I'm saying? I'm not just talking about some guy I met at work or in class. I was talking about you. On the phone. To my sister, if you're wondering, because you looked like you were thinking something else." A ghost of a smile flickered across his face before disappearing. "I've been in love with you for months, probably longer if I'm being honest with myself. And now you know, and I can't take it back, and I can't pretend anymore." The world seemed to tilt on its axis, everything I thought I understood about reality shifting to accommodate this new information. Ethan was in love with me. The words repeated in my head like a mantra, like a song I couldn't stop hearing. And with them came a rush of relief so intense it was almost painful. Because if he felt this way, if he'd been going through the same confusion and fear and desperate longing that I had, then maybe what I'd been feeling wasn't one-sided. Maybe the tension between us, the moments that had seemed charged with unspoken meaning, had been real, after all. "You think I'm going to be uncomfortable?" I heard myself say, my voice steadier than I expected. "Ethan, I've spent the last 3 months trying to convince myself that I was imagining the way you'd look at me sometimes, or the way my stomach would flip when you'd touch my arm, or the way I'd lie awake at night thinking about you in the next room. I've been terrified that I was losing my mind, that I was reading things into our friendship that weren't there because I was, because I was feeling things I'd never felt about a guy before. Now it was Ethan's turn to look stunned, his eyes widening as he processed what I was saying. "What are you?" "Logan, are you saying that you—" He trailed off, seeming unable to finish the sentence, as if saying it out loud might make it disappear, might reveal it to be some kind of misunderstanding or cruel joke. His chest was rising and falling rapidly, his breathing quickened by the same nervous energy that was coursing through my own body. I took a step closer to him, then another, closing the distance between us until we were standing face to face in the middle of our living room, surrounded by the ridiculous props of my abandoned prank. "I'm saying that when I heard you on the phone, my first thought wasn't disgust or discomfort. It was hope, Ethan. Desperate, terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, you were talking about me. And then you said things that sounded like us, like our life together. And I couldn't breathe because I wanted it to be me so badly." His hand came up slowly, hesitantly, until his fingers were ghosting along my jawline, barely touching but sending electricity racing across my skin. "And now?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "What are you thinking now?" His eyes searched mine, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. And I realized that this moment right here was the turning point. Whatever I said next, whatever I did, would determine the entire course of our future. Whether as friends or something more, or possibly nothing at all. "I'm thinking," I said, my own hand rising to mirror his gesture, my fingers trembling slightly as they traced the line of his jaw. Feeling the slight stubble there, the warmth of his skin, that I might be in love with you too. And that terrifies me more than anything ever has. But not enough to make me want to stop. Our faces were inches apart now, close enough that I could feel his breath on my lips, could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could count his eyelashes if I wanted to. The kiss, when it finally happened, wasn't the explosive, passionate collision I'd imagined in my private moments. Instead, it was soft and tentative, a question more than a statement. His lips gentle against mine as if he was afraid I might disappear or change my mind. My eyes fluttered closed, and I let myself sink into the sensation, the warmth of him, the slight coffee taste on his lips from his shift, the way his hand cradled my face like I was something precious and fragile. It lasted only a few seconds before we both pulled back, breathing hard, staring at each other in wonder and slight disbelief at what had just happened. "Was that okay?" Ethan asked, his thumb stroking gently across my cheekbone, and the vulnerability in his question, the genuine concern that he might have overstepped, despite my clear participation, made my heart swell with an emotion so intense it hurt. "I've wanted to do that for so long, but I need to know this is what you want, that you're sure. That you're not just caught up in the moment or feeling pressured," or I cut him off by kissing him again. More confidently this time, my hands sliding up to tangle in his hair, the way I'd imagined doing countless times before. He responded immediately, his arms wrapping around my waist and pulling me closer until there was no space left between our bodies. Until I could feel the rapid beating of his heart against my chest, matching the frantic rhythm of my own. This kiss was deeper, more certain, and when we finally broke apart, we were both slightly breathless, both grinning like idiots. The tension that had been building between us for months finally released. "I'm sure," I said firmly, resting my forehead against his, my hands still in his hair. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Ethan. This isn't some impulse or confusion or experimentation. This is you, us. And yeah, I'm scared out of my mind because I've never done this before, never felt this way about anyone, let alone my best friend and roommate. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe and miserable without you." We stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. The fake crime scene around us seemed to finally register in Ethan's awareness, and he pulled back slightly to look around at the elaborate setup, his eyebrows rising in amusement. "So," he said, a smile tugging at his lips, "I'm guessing this was supposed to be a prank? And I completely ruined it by having an emotional breakdown in the middle of your setup." I laughed, the sound bubbling up from my chest, releasing some of the nervous energy still coursing through my body. "Yeah, you've kind of destroyed my masterpiece. I was going to film your reaction and everything. Instead, I got the most terrifying and amazing night of my life. I glanced around at the fake blood and chalk outlines. We should probably clean this up before it stains the carpet. Our security deposit is already questionable enough without adding mysterious red stains to the list. Or, Ethan said, his arms tightening around my waist as he pulled me back toward him. We could leave it until morning and spend the rest of tonight talking. Actually talking, I mean. Because we have a lot to figure out, Logan. This changes everything between us, how we live together, what we tell people, how we navigate this thing we're starting, and I want to do it right. I want us to be on the same page about everything. He was right, of course. As much as I wanted to lose myself in the newness of this, in the physical reality of finally being able to touch him and kiss him and express what I'd been feeling, we needed to have the practical conversations too. So we settled onto our couch. The same worn piece of furniture where we'd spent countless evenings, watching movies and playing games and existing in each other's space. But this time, with my head resting on his shoulder and his arm around me, his fingers tracing absent patterns on my arm that made me shiver, we talked for hours, until the sky outside began to lighten with the approaching dawn. We talked about our fears-a-thon's worry that he'd push me into something I wasn't ready for. My concern that I'd somehow mess this up because I had no roadmap for navigating a relationship with another man. We talked about the practical aspects of dating your roommate, about setting boundaries while also allowing ourselves to explore this new dynamic between us. We talked about coming out, about whether we were ready to tell our friends and families, about how to handle the inevitable questions and judgments that would come. I need to take this slow, I admitted at one point. My fingers interlaced with his, marveling at how natural it felt to hold his hand. Not because I'm not sure about who I am completely, but because this is all new to me and I need time to process what it means, to understand this part of myself that I never really explored before. I don't want to rush into something and then panic and hurt you because I didn't give myself space to figure things out. Ethan's response was immediate and reassuring. Slow is good, he said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. I'm not going anywhere, Logan. We literally live together, remember? We have all the time in the world to figure this out. And honestly, I need slow too. Just because I've known I was into guys for longer doesn't mean I know what I'm doing here. I've never been in love before, never had feelings this intense for anyone. So we'll learn together, okay? We'll make mistakes and fix them, and probably have some spectacular arguments about stupid things like whose turn it is to do the dishes, but we'll figure it out. As the sun began to stream through our living room windows, painting everything in shades of gold and pink, we finally acknowledged that we should probably try to get some sleep before the day fully began. But neither of us wanted to move, wanted to break this spell we were under, this bubble of new understanding and possibility. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and Ethan stood, pulling me up with him, his hands still clasped around mine. Your room or mine? He asked with a small smile. And I could see the question beneath the question. How much intimacy was I comfortable with right now? How fast did I want this to move? I appreciated him asking, appreciated that even in the midst of all these new feelings, he was still thinking about my comfort and boundaries. Yours, I decided after a moment. But just to sleep, okay? I meant what I said about slow, he nodded, understanding without judgment, and led me down the hallway to his bedroom, a space I'd been in countless times before, but which now felt different, significant in a new way. We climbed into his bed, still fully clothed, and he pulled me against his chest, his arms wrapped securely around me, my face tucked into the curve of his neck where I could feel his pulse beating steadily. The following weeks were a study in adjustment and discovery, and learning how to be together in this new way while maintaining the friendship that had been the foundation of everything between us. We decided to keep our relationship private at first, not out of shame, but because we wanted time to figure ourselves out without outside pressure or opinions. At work and in classes, we were still just Logan and Ethan, best friends and roommates. But at home, in the privacy of our apartment, we were exploring what it meant to be something more. We went on dates. Though they often looked different than traditional ones, late-night walks through the city. When we were both restless and full of energy, Cooking disasters in our tiny kitchen that ended with us ordering takeout while laughing at our failures. Movie marathons where we'd spend more time stealing kisses than actually watching the films. Each moment built on the last, creating a new history between us. One marked by tentative hand-holding and nervous. First attempts at expressing physical affection and long conversations about feelings that neither of us were particularly good at articulating. The physical side of our relationship developed slowly, at a pace I set and Ethan respected without complaint. We'd kiss on the couch, sometimes for long enough that my lips would be swollen and tingling when we finally pulled apart. He'd hold me from behind while we cooked, his chin resting on my shoulder, his presence warm and solid and comforting. We'd fall asleep tangled together in one or the other's bed. The intimacy of sleeping next to someone I cared about this deeply sometimes, feeling even more vulnerable than any. Physical contact, but there were challenges too. Moments when my own internalized hesitations and fears would surface unexpectedly. Like the afternoon when one of my coworkers made a casually homophobic comment in the break room, and I'd laughed along with everyone else instead of speaking up, and then spent the entire evening consumed with guilt and self-loathing, while Ethan patiently listened and held me while I worked through my feelings. Or the night when my mother called to chat, and when she asked how things were going with Ethan, I'd deflected and changed the subject, unable to find the words to tell her that her son was dating his male roommate. And the weight of that omission sat heavy in my chest for days afterward. You don't have to come out before you're ready, Ethan told me after one particularly difficult conversation about my relationship with my family. We were sitting on our apartment balcony, a bottle of wine between us, the city lights twinkling below. This isn't a race, Logan. There's no deadline for figuring out your identity or being public about us. I'll take whatever you can give me, whenever you're ready to give it. But his patience, while appreciated, also made me feel guilty. Like I was asking him to hide in the shadows while I worked through my issues. You've been out for years, I said, my frustration evident in my voice. You're comfortable with who you are. And here I am, still trying to figure out if I'm gay or bi or something else entirely. Still too scared to tell my family or my friends because I'm worried about how they'll react. That's not fair to you, Ethan. You deserve someone who's proud to be with you, not someone who's hiding you. He reached across the space between us to take my hand, his thumb brushing across my knuckles. I deserve someone who makes me happy, he corrected gently. And that's you, Logan. Closeted, questioning, confused, none of that changes how I feel about you. Besides, coming out isn't a one-time thing. It's a process that continues for your entire life. Every time you meet someone new or start a new job or enter a new situation, I'm not going to pressure you to be somewhere you're not ready to be. The turning point came about 2 months into our relationship at a party thrown by one of Ethan's coworkers. I'd agreed to go despite my nervousness about being around his friends, about potentially running into someone who might pick up on the dynamic between us. The party was crowded and loud, the kind of social situation I normally would have tolerated for an hour before making excuses to leave. But watching Ethan in his element, laughing and talking easily with people he knew, something shifted inside me. I noticed a guy across the room who kept looking at Ethan, his interest obvious in the way his gaze would linger, the way he'd found excuses to stand close and touch Ethan's arm while talking. And watching someone else flirt with the person I cared about, I felt a surge of possessiveness so strong it surprised me. Ethan wasn't mine to claim in public, not yet, not when we were still keeping things private. But in that moment, I wanted everyone in that room to know that he was with me, that he'd chosen me, that whatever we had between us was real and important. When Ethan caught my eye from across the room, he must have seen something in my expression because he immediately excused himself from his conversation and made his way over to where I was standing against the wall. You okay? He asked, his hand ghosting near mine, but not quite touching, still maintaining the appearance of friendship in this public space. Do you need to leave? Because we can go anytime, Logan. Just say the word. Instead of answering, instead of accepting his offer to escape, I closed the small distance between us and kissed him. Right there, in front of all his coworkers and friends. In the middle of a crowded party, I kissed him the way I'd been wanting to for weeks, unapologetically, claiming him as mine and announcing to everyone watching that we were together. When I pulled back, Ethan was staring at me with wide eyes, his mouth slightly open in shock, and I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes on us. "I'm done hiding," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I'm done being scared of what people might think or say. You're my boyfriend, Ethan, and I want people to know that. I want them to know that I'm the lucky one who gets to be with you." The words felt both terrifying and liberating to say out loud, like I was finally admitting something to myself as much as to everyone else in that room. The smile that spread across Ethan's face was radiant, transforming his features with pure joy. He pulled me back in for another kiss, this one deeper and longer, and around us I could hear the sounds of conversation resuming, of people processing what they'd just witnessed and then moving on with their evenings. When we finally broke apart, both of us slightly breathless, Ethan's coworker, Marcus, approached with a grin on his face. "About damn time," Marcus said, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. "We've been taking bets on how long it would take you to figure your shit out. I had money on 2 months, so you're right on schedule." The casual acceptance in his tone, the lack of shock or judgment, helped ease some of the tension still coiled in my chest. Other people came over to offer congratulations or make teasing comments. And while not everyone was entirely comfortable, caught a few awkward glances and whispered conversations, the overall response was far more positive than my anxiety-riddled brain had convinced me it would be. The weeks following that party were simultaneously easier and more complicated. Coming out to Ethan's friends had been one thing, but now I had to face the prospect of telling my own family and friends, people who had known me my entire life and who had certain expectations about who I was and who I'd end up with. I started small, telling my sister first during a phone call where I nervously rambled for 10 minutes before finally getting to the point. Her response, "I'm happy you're happy. I can't wait to meet him properly," made me cry with relief. My parents were harder. I'd always had a good relationship with them, but they were traditional in their views, and I wasn't sure how they'd react to learning their son was dating another man. I put off telling them for weeks, making excuses about why I couldn't come home for weekend visits, avoiding video calls where they might see Ethan in the background and ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. Ethan never pushed, but I could see the concern in his eyes. The worry that my reluctance to tell my family meant I was having second thoughts about us. Finally, on a Sunday afternoon, 3 months into our relationship, I called my parents and asked them both to get on the line because I had something important to tell them. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone, and Ethan sat beside me on the couch, holding my free hand, offering silent support. The conversation was difficult. There were long pauses, confused questions, and an admission from my father that he needed time to process this information. But by the end of the call, both of my parents had said they loved me. And while my mother had cried and my father had sounded disappointed, they'd also invited Ethan and me to come home for dinner the following weekend. That wasn't a complete disaster, I said to Ethan after hanging up, my body still trembling with leftover adrenaline and emotion. They didn't disown me or tell me I was going to hell or any of the horrible scenarios I've been imagining. They need time, which I guess I can understand. I leaned into his embrace, letting him wrap his arms around me, grounding me with his solid presence. "I'm proud of you," Ethan murmured into my hair. "That took a lot of courage, Logan, and whatever happens with your family, whatever they decide or how long they need to adjust, you have me. We're going to get through this together, okay?" His words, his unwavering support throughout this entire process, made me realize just how lucky I was to have found someone who understood both the magnitude of what I was going through and the patience it required to navigate it. The dinner with my parents the following weekend was awkward, but not terrible. My mother fussed over both of us, cooking enough food for a small army. And my father spent most of the evening asking Ethan polite but distant questions about his work and his classes. It wasn't the warm, immediate acceptance I'd hoped for, but it wasn't rejection either. As we were leaving, my mother pulled me into a tight hug and whispered, "I just want you to be happy, sweetie. If he makes you happy, then I'll learn to be okay with this." Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Ethan and I were openly together, navigating the complexities of being boyfriends and roommates and best friends all at once. We had our first real fight about a month later, a ridiculous argument about dishes that escalated into yelling and hurt feelings, before we both realized how stupid it was and apologized. We had moments of insecurity, times when I'd worry that Ethan would get tired of dealing with my ongoing identity questions, or when he'd wonder if I was truly satisfied in our relationship, or if I'd eventually want to explore dating women again. But through all of it, the foundation of our friendship remained, a deep understanding and connection we'd built long before romance entered the picture. We still had our movie nights and our gaming sessions and our terrible cooking experiments. We still made each other laugh until our stomachs hurt, still knew each other's moods and needs almost instinctively. The romance we'd added, the kisses and the hand-holding and the quiet intimacy of falling asleep together every night felt like a natural extension of what had always been there, rather than something entirely new and separate. 6 months after that night when I'd overheard Ethan on the phone. We were lying in bed together on a lazy Sunday morning, the sunlight streaming through the curtains. Neither of us ready to face the day quite yet. I was tracing patterns on his chest, my head resting in the crook of his shoulder, feeling completely content and at peace in a way I'd never experienced before. He was playing with my hair, his fingers running through the short strands in a soothing, repetitive motion. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" I asked quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. "On the phone? Before you knew I was listening? About feeling like you were losing your mind, about seeing me every day and not being able to tell me how you felt." I felt him nod, his chin bumping against the top of my head. "Yeah," he said softly. "I remember every word of that conversation. It was probably the scariest night of my life, right up until it turned into the best night of my life." "Why?" His fingers paused in my hair, and I could feel him tensing slightly. Probably worried that I was about to bring up some concern or problem, I tilted my head back to look up at him, meeting his eyes. I was thinking about how much has changed since then. How we went from being terrified of ruining our friendship to building something even stronger. And I was thinking about how you said you loved me even though you didn't think I could hear it. I took a deep breath, my heart picking up speed. "Well, I can hear it now. And I want you to know that I love you too, Ethan. Completely, irrevocably, in ways I'm still figuring out how to express. But it's real, and it's not going anywhere." The smile that spread across his face was brilliant, lighting up his entire expression with pure happiness. "I love you too," he said, the words clear and certain, no hesitation or doubt. "So damn much, Logan. Every single day. I love you more than I did the day before." He pulled me up so we were face to face, his hands cradling my jaw as he kissed me deeply, conveying without words everything he felt, everything we'd built together as we lay there together. Wrapped up in each other and in the life we were creating, I thought about how strange and unpredictable the path to this moment had been. If I hadn't decided to do that stupid prank, if I hadn't woken up when I did, if I hadn't heard Ethan's vulnerable confession, would we have ever gotten here? Or would we have spent years dancing around each other, too scared to risk what we had for the possibility of something more? I was grateful we'd never have to find out. Grateful for that midnight moment that had cracked open everything we'd been hiding, and forced us both to confront feelings we'd been trying to deny. What had started as an overheard conversation had become the beginning of the most important relationship of my life. The moment when I'd finally understood who I was, and what I wanted, and that sometimes the scariest risks led to the most incredible rewards. So that's how a simple prank turned into the most significant night of my life. What started as a plan to make Ethan laugh ended with both of us discovering feelings we'd been hiding for months. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of fear and doubt, and difficult conversations with family and friends, but every challenge we faced together made our bond stronger. Looking back now, I wouldn't change a single thing about how we found our way to each other. What about you? Have you ever had a moment that completely changed your life? A conversation you weren't supposed to hear? A confession you weren't ready for? Or a realization that shifted everything you thought you knew about yourself? Drop your stories in the comments below. Love hearing about those turning point moments that make us who we are. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more LGBTQ romantic stories and real talk about relationships, identity, and finding yourself. Your support means everything and helps me continue sharing stories that matter. And here's the real question. Do you want a part 2? Should I tell you about what happened when we went to my parents' house?